think we're probably just about there. So why don't we kick off now? As I said, I'm John. I'm the CEO of the IAB. Thank you very much for joining us today. The main kind of topic today will be direct-to-consumer brands. Now, we did a big study last year, actually, looking at who the big brands were in the UK, what the trends were, how their strategies differed, and what consumers were doing and how consumers were interacting with D2C brands we looked at as well. And why we think this is important is because D2C brands are spending billions of pounds in advertising globally. So if you're a media owner, if you're an agency, there's a massive opportunity to be able to try and better help these businesses. And if you're an advertiser, obviously you might want to learn from their strategies and what they're doing. So Sophia will join us in a second to take us through that. I just wanted to very quickly share a couple of things we're doing and also just share some of the process for today. So we want to try and make it interactive. There is a Q&A tool, there's a chat tool, but there's also a Q&A tool that you'll see at the bottom of your window, which you can click on to ask us a question at any time. So please do ask questions. We want it to be interactive. We'll start off by trying to make it interactive by having a fun poll. So if we move on, hopefully, yes, look, now a poll should have appeared, a question for you on your page. So Tom Moore, the 99-year-old, who I would find it hard to believe none of you have heard of, did 100 lengths of his garden to raise money for the NHS. How much has he raised so far? So here we are, a little quiz to test out how closely you've been paying attention to the news so far. And this is as of 1:30 p.m. today. We just double checked. So click your answer, click on submit. And once a few of you've done that, we'll show you the results. Look at that, half of you got it correct. So it's 28, just over 28 million so far that he's raised, which is a phenomenal amount of money. I'm sure, no one in their wildest dreams would have ever thought he could achieve so much. So massive kudos to Mr. Tom Moore for raising £28 million for the NHS. So you can talk to us at any point with the Q&A or with the chat tool. Just first of all, I just want to share with you some of the things we've been doing around IAB UK Connected. So we think it's more important than ever to bring people together, to bring the industry together. So in IAB UK Connected, there's a section on our site that brings together all of the stuff that we think is important at the moment. It houses a whole host of resources, information on how to work from home, how to do that well, inspiration for your businesses, and I'll share a few of the other things that are in there as well. If you've still got a poll answer box on your screen, you can close that down, you can drag that around. You can also move the presenter view and stuff as well if I'm in the way of it. One of the things that's in Connected is work we've been doing around CV tools, around keyword blocking. So we've been involved in a cross-industry campaign working with the other trade bodies. So working with the IPA, ISBAR, Newsworks, the NMA, the AOP. I may have missed some off there, but we've been working with all the players involved. I mean, obviously within our membership, we've got the CV tools themselves as well as the news brands. We've been talking to the government, so the government have now sent out a letter to advertisers. We've also launched practical guidance for advertisers of how to use content verification tools and how to get the most out of them, and how to make sure they're not unwittingly blocking news content that's related to COVID-19. So there's tons of stuff on the site that will explain, what's happening and what you can do to help. We've also got, Anna, if you could move us on one more slide after that as well. Another thing we've launched is our IAB UK Connected podcasts. So rather than having a podcast every 2 weeks. We've got one every couple of days, pretty much. We just wanted to share a quick clip from one we did with Kantar, who have a 7-point checklist of how you should tackle COVID-19 with brands, which Jane was talking through with James, and we'll just show you, play you a very quick clip from that now. Which, sadly, I think you probably can't hear because I can't hear, but never mind. It's very good. That's all you need to know. Let's not worry about it. It's okay. You can find it on all of the places you'd usually find podcasts. It's available in all reputable outlets for free. So please do listen. We've also have a range of sessions where we will come to you as well. You choose a topic, you choose a time, and we'll come and deliver a bespoke session for your team and just for your business, so you can ask us questions that are pertinent to you. Here are some of the sessions that are available. Of course, the direct-to-consumer stuff we'll be talking about today, that's born online, but there's stuff on, what's happening in policy and regs and why that's important to your business, how you deliver, the best ads online, how you deliver attention online, through to, an insight into the gold standard and what that means and why it's important for your business. So please do talk to us if you would like us to come to a session specifically for your business. The other thing, or another thing that's within IAB UK Connected, is we're sharing some of the brilliant things that our members are doing as well. So joining us today is Hebe, who's going to just take a minute to take you through some of the things that members have shared with us recently. So Hebe, over to you.
Thank you, John. I'm Hebe from the marketing team. If you're new here, for the next few minutes, I'll be highlighting a handful of the ways in which our members are adapting to the COVID-19 outbreak and embracing these new ways of working. We're receiving new insights every week, so please do keep them coming. So first up, for many of us, keeping our phone clean has not been at the top of our priority list. But what if we told you that mobile phones are 10 times dirtier than the average toilet seat? Well, keeping them clean is even more important during the COVID-19 outbreak. And to raise awareness, Oguri has launched a Wash Your Phone campaign, a mobile campaign encouraging mobile phone users to regularly clean their devices, eventually aiming to raise funds for those affected by COVID-19 across the globe. Each mobile user who clicks on the video ad will be redirected to a fundraising page, raising funds to support longer-term recovery and education efforts run by local vetted organisations in regions badly affected by COVID-19. It's a really, really great campaign, and all of the links to it are all on our website. Next up, how do you keep team spirit and have a few laughs while being so far away from one another? Well, the team over at Tailorfy have it covered, from twice weekly workouts, meditation sessions on Thursdays, a pub quiz every Friday, as well as weird and wonderful challenges such as their fridge challenge. You can find out more about that on our website also. Aside from boosting team morale, Tailorfy have also launched an Insights WhatsApp chat, which is a daily broadcast with data from the latest global reports turned into actionable insights to help you react to changes in real time. Each broadcast has an example of how a brand is currently implementing the strategies well. Information on joining their WhatsApp community can be found over on our website. And finally, Creative Equals have launched their Ask Us Anything campaign, which is a free webinar series to discuss key challenges and then workshop the actions together. Past sessions have focused on mental health, ensuring diversity is still at the top of the agenda, as well as remote working as a parent or carer. They are also offering a 90-minute session guiding you through tips and tricks on becoming a pro in video calls. And you can sign up to that via their website. All of the examples that I've spoken about today can be found over on our Connected Hub, which has direct links for everything I've spoken about today. And if you'd like to get involved, please drop myself or Rachel an email. I am going to hand over to the lovely Sophia now. Are you there, Sophia?
I am indeed.
Right,
and I'm just going to take over the screen. Thank you, Hebe. And hopefully We are on. Thank you, Hebe. Hi everyone, hope you're having a good day, good Wednesday. I'm here, as John mentioned, to talk about Born Online, which is our study that we carried out looking specifically at the direct-to-consumer market. We focused on the retail sector. We did look at some services and some financial brands and so on, and food delivery, but we decided to focus this on retail, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we learned and how it's useful to you. So the reason we set out on this mission was because our focus as the trade body for digital advertising is to look at the future and make it more sustainable in digital advertising. And we noticed that a lot of the D2C brands were getting a lot of headlines and coverage. They were bubbling up in terms of growth, or at least sort of creating quite a lot of talk. And what we also noticed was they were doing things really differently with digital. They were much more sort of naturally native. And to that effect, we wanted to share with our members, with yourselves, what it is that they do and why they do it, and how that can be interesting and might also affect traditional brands. We also looked to our cousins over in the States who had done a study looking at the rise of the 21st century brand, and they'd looked at around 200 D2C brands in the States, how they were working, what they did differently, and how they used digital advertising. So we decided to focus purely on the UK market. And one thing we were seeing, as I mentioned the headlines, was that there was quite a lot of talk about how they were working differently. So there was everything from Eve Sleep petitioning the government to recognise sleep as a human right, because they believe incredibly importantly that sleep is critical to people living a healthy, happy life, to having good mental health and doing good day's work, because their product helps people get that, right through to Huel very outwardly announcing that they weren't going to use TV and out of home after a trial because they weren't seeing the results in that media. They were going to move all their spend back to purely digital, where they were seeing the impact of it and its return on investment. We also saw a lot of technology being used as part of these brands, obviously e-commerce, delivery and so on, but things like Thread use AI to help promote menswear recommendations to consumers. So they use fashion consultants, but they combine that with technology to give people the best recommendations for cuts and styles of clothes. So we just felt this was squarely in our camp, and we were really excited to find out a bit more about it. So in order to kick off the report, what I'm going to do is show you a video of 5 of the founders and CMOs of the businesses, where they talk a lot about their mission, why they do what they do, why it matters, and I think you'll get a good flavour of how interesting, how focused and how driven these people are.
I'm Steph Douglas. I'm the founder of Don't Buy Her Flowers.
My name's James Sturrock. I'm the Chief Exec here at Eve Sleep.
My name is Tang Vota, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Calendly.
I'm Kate Wang. I'm the CMO at Calendly.
I'm James Davidson. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Tails.com.
My name's Tom Broughton. I founded a spectacles company called Cubits. We founded Cubits with this idea to make people excited about spectacles again. I think anyone that's worn spectacles at school quickly becomes known as the specky four-eyed kid, and that was me.
The idea for Don't Buy Her Flowers started when I had my first baby, and I was sitting on the sofa feeling overwhelmed, leaky, weepy, and flowers kept arriving. And then my initial reaction was, wow, you get gifts when you have a baby. I just wasn't something I'd thought about. And then as time went on, and it just felt like another thing to care for when you're doing more caring than you've ever done in your life.
We are trying to innovate in the femcare industry that is really ripe for disruption. The femcare industry hasn't really changed for a number of decades.
I think one of the reasons that Tails has been successful is the timing was just right between the adoption of technology by consumers, affordable technology for a startup like us to be able to build their own factory, and also the availability and use by consumers of media platforms that allow you to reach the right people with the product that you have affordably.
We absolutely obsess about our customers. We listen to them all the time. We get feedback. We look at reviews. That feedback is what keeps us innovating our product.
You know, it's really important for us to be honest with people. So, you know, we'll regularly say to customers, don't buy that. you look bad in that. That's the wrong thing for you. And I think that sort of feeds into the kind of the culture and the aura, which hopefully feeds into the retail experience and the digital experience and all of the word of mouth that hopefully kind of bubbles up around us.
We believe business should be a force for good. In fact, we're the first femcare B Corp in the UK. every decision we do, we think about the greater impact and not just trying to make money. So we really want to make a difference in the world.
What we've learned is that our product isn't an instant buy, so it's not something you're going to see and go, oh, I know someone who needs that. It's more likely that we need them to know the brand and have heard about the brand, and then in time they will then come to us. What we found with Facebook ads is that if you test them based on the next day's data, they're not going to perform very well, but if you do it within 30 days, they track really well.
So our advertising strategy is to really cut through that inertia we have in this category. When we did some research, we found out that around 80% of women were buying the same brands that they bought when they first started their period. So what we really want to do is to stop inertia, get women to start thinking about the period products they buy, start thinking about the quality of the products that they buy, and also how they buy it.
Advertising represents the first moment that a dog owner hears about us, the first moment that they decide to give us a try and come to our website, what they get in their emails following a confirmation of a first trial, and what arrives in a box and that they feed their dog, not just on that first trial order, but every subsequent order, needs to be absolutely joined up and build this holistic experience.
Great. So I hope through that video you saw quite how sort of focused and driven those people are. They were great. They're very busy. They work really hard, but they let us into their offices. And that was a normal day in the Tails office where they had the dogs running around. It wasn't especially for us. And I'll come on to talk a bit about culture as we go through. So just before I sort of run through the full details of the report, as a sort of recap, D2C brand, clearly direct to consumer, it's in the name. They sell directly to consumers rather than sort of via retail. They don't sort of sell a big load of stock to a retailer and wait till it's sold. What's really interesting about this is the fact that they are involved, engaged, and maintain control over the entire cycle of the production, the manufacturing, right through to the promotion, marketing, distribution, right through to the sort of customer service at the sales point, and then getting all that feedback through from the customers. To that end, they've got this massive loop of engagement with the consumer, and they find out everything that they are ordering. They know all of the kind of questions that they typically would get from the consumers, and they understand if there's any problems with the service delivery or any part of it, which makes them super intelligent in terms of understanding their customer because they're so involved. This leads to the point 3 there, which is about being able to provide tailored offerings and a level of personalisation that you don't tend to see anywhere else. Quite often this is not at a particularly high premium because it's what they focus on. And the personalisation isn't, for example, getting a towel embroidered with your name. It's about the stuff that James was talking about in tails.com, where he says the food that they provide is not only based on the breed of dog that you have, but it's also based on their age. And nutritionally, they alter the balance of the food you get month on month as the dog gets a little bit older to ensure that it's getting its completely balanced diet for its needs at that time. So everything is sort of perfect, basically. So as part of this report, we did some industry research where we defined the 50 leading brands, which I'll talk about. We then spoke to consumers to understand a bit more about them and what they feel about these brands and why they might buy them. And then we did a bit more in-depth interview of some of the brands, more than the ones that you just saw on the video. So the research that we used in order to whittle it down, we did this work with MTM. They helped us to compile a list of 500 or 600 direct consumer brands, and we needed to get that down to something useful. At one point we talked about a top 20 list of brands, but we soon realized that actually these brands are growing at quite exponential rates quite quickly, and it might be easier to look at leading brands rather than a top brand because different ones were pipping each other to the post. So we also thought that would be useful because it gave us an opportunity to look at lots of different categories. So in order to kind of be considered for the sort of short list, or the long list as it were, they had to be born online, digitally native brands. They had to sell in the UK in pounds sterling and deliver. They had to produce or curate physical products as opposed to offering a platform or service. So as I said at the beginning, it had to be that kind of retail product. And they certainly had to offer some form of disruption in a positive way to either the business model or the product itself. Quite often this was a fact that they did subscription where something you may not normally buy as a subscription product, but also it may be the way that the product was produced or the ethical stance of it. We ranked these on their level of UK presence, their level of disruption, press mentions and social media following and engagement. So that helped us to sort of create some form of ranking and enabled us to have a real range of brands that were quite big and established through to some smaller up and coming ones. So I'm now going to flip to the slide where you can see the 50 that fell into the leading list for us. So these are mainly UK-based brands, but in each category there are a few from overseas, but they sell in the UK. And I think any minute now we should get a little poll on the screen, which I'd love to know, just to get a bit of a feedback from you guys, how many of those you recognise or know, how many of the brands that you know, up to 10, around half, most of them, or all of them, or none in fact. And if you want to be able to see them, you can move that poll across the screen to the right or to the left so you can see the full list. So I'll just talk about a couple of those while I'm waiting to get the poll filled out. But there's everything there from Brushbox in the health and fitness category, which produces environmentally friendly toothbrushes made of bamboo as a much better alternative, but also delivers them on subscription, based on the fact that the founder had this real kind of moment of truth when he spoke to friends and family who didn't know when they last replaced their toothbrush. They just sort of didn't know how long they'd had it. So the idea of getting a subscription reminds you to update that, right through to something like Allbirds in the accessories and shoes category. The shop's actually on Longacre, just by our main offices. And they produce sustainable shoes made from byproduct of trees and merino wool to create a very sustainable footwear brand, which is sort of really fashionable, quite expensive, but very, very cool. So you've got a real range of different products that we've got in this list, right through to something like Made in the home category, which many of us will have known or perhaps purchased from because they've been around for a long time and quite mainstream. So thank you for everyone who has done the poll. I think we've just closed it, and it's good to see that it's not so easy doing this live. Around half, well, no, about 40% of you know half of the brands. No one knows all of them, which is quite common when I present this, because there are some quite individual brands. And I think also whether or not you have maybe children or dogs, you may or may not know of some of those brands because they wouldn't be relevant categories for you. So thank you for that. Thanks for sharing the poll. And you can just click that off your screens as we go. So moving on to the consumer survey, once we'd established that league of sort of 50 brands, we went to talk to consumers and we surveyed 2,000 of them that were representative of the UK population on how familiar they were with those 50 brands. So this was a kind of UK-wide and a very broad age survey to see what it was that made these people who bought these brands different. We looked at their demographics, we looked at their media consumption, and we looked at things like their satisfaction with those brands, whether they rated them if they bought them. And there were some quite interesting findings, and there's some very detailed stuff on the website that you can log in to access more detail on this research. But the top line was that 97%, so nearly everybody had heard of at least one of those leading brands, and maybe not so surprising when you saw the Made and the maybe Bloom and Wild, some of the sort of bigger known brands. 39% had purchased one of those products, which we thought was positive. But really interestingly, 10% had purchased from 5 or more D2C brands from that list, which we thought really secured them in the mainstream, because it's not just knowledge of them, people are actually purchasing, and quite a few of those are subscriptions, so people are kind of buying into them in a big way. What else we found out from the consumer survey was that the people who purchased them, the D2C brands, actually had quite different media behaviour from the people that didn't. So they watched less linear TV, they accessed more of their news from digital, from social media, they were early adopters, they were quite often asked by others about purchase choices, so they were there quite influential. They were certainly happy with paying a bit more for convenience in the tailored products. They really value the delivery to door, the pause function on a subscription, the fact they could tailor things to their needs. And they also really valued and sought out trusted ethical brands. So they were very much representative of this sort of socially conscious consumer, which a lot of these brands certainly represent, because they're quite new brands. They've come about quite recently, and they've come from sort of a place of a human truth that's the solution that they offer. And the people who've developed these brands often have sort of environmental and socially conscious considerations at heart. So for the sort of next part of the presentation, I'm just going to talk you through some of the characteristics that unite these brands in the main. So not every single one of them displayed them, but a large amount of them had these three things in common. And we think they really help us to sort of lift the lid on what makes these brands quite so special and quite so interesting and successful. So the first is that they have a clear vision and purpose. The second, that they are completely focused on the data side of things. And the third thing is that digital sort of has a really, really big part in their development and their sort of future development. So I'll rest on each one in turn, and I've got some examples to illustrate. So the first being this clear vision and purpose, and I often talk about it as being like a red thread through their entire brand focus. They have a sort of mission and they know what it is, and the founder holds it very, very sort of dear and close to the heart of the business, and that way it is reflected through everything that the business does, both sort of internally and externally. So an example of this might be the fact that the founders often draw on a personal experience. So Steph from Don't Buy Her Flowers talked quite clearly about the fact that she had that moment where she just had a baby and flowers were arriving, and the last thing she knew where to find was another vase. And it's a very true fact that when you're in a period of sort of change, that actually sometimes it's quite nice if someone just brings round a dinner for you, or looks out for you in another way, rather than giving you something else to look for. So that sort of honest truth, in the same way as the Brushbox founder realised that people didn't remember when they changed their toothbrush, is sort of a human truth that can't be denied. Therefore it does resonate quite a lot with consumers. The second point is around the fact that they often have a very strong social purpose, and this means that their brand clearly shows that sort of authenticity if that social purpose is kept very sort of strong within the business. So one example is Calorie, the fem care brand you saw in the video, where they are a certified B Corp company, which means, you know, they focus on doing good business and doing things well. So they know the provenance of all of the ingredients that they buy for their products. They are very careful where they buy them from. They're very clear about any chemicals used and so on. They want things to be as pure as they can be, and they can convey all that to their customers. And they also give back to charity. They also donate their time. They do lots of good things, which is absolutely in their DNA. So when people buy from that brand, they know what they're buying into, and a lot of people really value that. Another example is Gusto, who produce the recipe kits for people to buy. Sorry, I'm getting an interruption. TV, yes, anything. They make recipe kits for people to buy so that they can widen their repertoire of foods, but also so that they can reduce waste, because there's a lot of waste in the food production area, whether that's supermarkets and restaurants and so on. And by only giving you exactly the amount of food that you need to make a certain recipe, Gusto help to reduce waste, because people can cook quite a lot of things without throwing loads of stuff out. And they also commit to things like reducing plastic, so they've sort of smashed their target to do that already this year. So this sort of social purpose is broad and strong within their business. And the final point here is they reflect their values internally. So that basically ensures that they attract, motivate great people to their sorry, I've been asked to turn my voice a bit down. That way they motivate high performing teams. And I sort of mentioned with Tails that they allow dogs in the office. That means that people who love dogs, want to work for Tails, can do without worrying about who's going to look after their dog in the day, because they can take them in. There was another really interesting stat that we found as we did this study, which was that there was quite a lot of female founders in that list of 50 for those businesses. 32% of those businesses had a female founder as part of the sort of company. When we looked at the FTSE 100 in comparison, we saw just 5% had a female CEO. So you can see that these businesses are much more diverse, and they're reflecting the world in which we live, which is only a great thing. The second point I want to make is around the brands listening to feedback and using data in everything that they do to improve and super serve their customers. This is something that really, I guess, is a surprise delight they're able to do the best possible service for their customers because they really understand them. So the first example is that they don't stand still. They tend to improve their products throughout, well, all the time. So Heist, the tights and shapewear brand, every time they do a batch of manufacturing, they will create some sort of change in the design based on all the feedback they had. They iterate each time because they always get feedback and they want to make their product better and more responsive to customer needs. The second example here is around the idea that they focus more on their customers than on the competition. And James from Eve talks about that, where he says they obsess about their customers. They genuinely tend to believe that if they listen to their customers rather than worry about doing lots of competitor reviews, they will produce the best possible product. And that seems to be the case in many examples. And finally, they treat data as a key asset to make it available across the business. So there's a fantastic quote here on the right, where Tom Wallace from Gusto talks about the fact that they invested heavily in data infrastructure right from the get-go. And not only do they make that data available to their buying team so they can make sure they've got the right ingredients for the orders coming in, but they also make it available to their performance marketing teams, which means they can see if there's a food fad or a trend, or they can see if people are changing their diet based on the weather perhaps and buying lighter salad type meals, and on that basis they can then target accordingly. So it's, you know, I've worked for agencies in the past with clients who just may have that data, but they couldn't get hold of it for 3 weeks, if at all. So this idea that it's absolutely accessible at the time is just amazing. The third point on the characteristics we saw in common was the idea that they all love digital. It's at the heart of their sales and marketing strategy, and it defines their every move. So the first reason that they love digital so much is because it's sort of where they began. They started online, they sold online, and it gives them that flexibility, something that we all understand. They could put a little bit of money into something, test and learn, they could edit their website, they could change their comms. What we then find is that they prefer to spend on channels that allow them to measure their business impact. You heard the example of fuel at the beginning, where they didn't see that straight away. And we know really that these brands typically want to sort of see this business impact. And again, they'll want to dip their toe in the water, try something out, maybe add some spend as they go. And the final point is that when the time is right, when they maybe diversify some of these brands into offline channels, they quite often use the approach that they had with digital. So they will want to test the water, as it were. So rather than maybe selling to retail and producing a lot of stock and having it sat on the shelves and able to change it based on customer feedback, might do a pop-up shop and see if, you know, what feedback they get, see how it works, and tie that in with their digital comms. So it's a much more flexible way of expanding their media. And I think this is explained really nicely by Tang from Callaley, who's the CEO, where he says, I can't just say, let's spend 50K on this channel. I need to have an idea of the outcome first. So really now, just a couple of slides to sort of close, which are really recommendations and ways in which we think the wider industry can work with the D2C brands. So this first section talks about sort of what media owners, publishers and data partners can maybe do to help D2C brands reach more of their potential audience online. So the way that we saw it when we talked to the D2Cs is they see their customers as people they want to have interactions with. They don't want to have transactions. They don't want to sell to them. They want to have a dialogue and they want to engage with them. That's the only way they can improve their product and understand if what they're doing is correct. So we also know from the other side that the D2C customers want to interact with their favourite brands and they're keen to sort of discover new ones. So really, if media owners can present to them new opportunities, ways that they can talk to audiences in a much more kind of engaged and sort of direct way, they would be very keen to hear more. The second point is that they really want those partners to offer them the same data-driven approach as the D2Cs already have. So it might be helping them maybe segment their data better, supplement their data, think about it from a different perspective. And the third point is that they definitely will want to do things on a more sort of test and learn basis. And when we sometimes talk to media owners and publishers, we've talked about the challenges that sometimes the D2Cs might not have the budget level that's sort of the threshold required amount in order to try out new media. And if there can be a case study or a test a test case where they can try it out at a slightly lower level. If it's successful, they will obviously up their spend and focus more on it, but it's just getting them through the door. The second sort of list of recommendations is really about how partners and agencies can help them reach the next phase of their growth. But also we think that anyone working with D2Cs would learn such a great deal that they could share that maybe with other clients that they work with in terms of how they innovate their process a little bit more. So first of all, helping D2Cs have a bit more of a broader perspective in terms of marketing objectives and channels. Quite often the D2Cs feel that they know their market, they know their audience, and they do, but I think there's always more that the wider ecosystem can offer, more perspective, more opportunities, and help them just reset them and be a sort of good sounding board. We really found that the main thing for D2Cs is about sort of collaboration and trust. So I think all of these play off so much better if they can sort of, I'd say, sit around the table, which may not be quite so feasible at the moment, but the idea of them being able to trust and work with people, the D2Cs want to sort of see the back end of how things work. They want to understand better how things, how agencies might plan something or data companies might work with them before they'll sort of jump in. Once they have that kind of trust and understanding and collaboration, they really will embrace it and get involved. The second point is just this idea of their mindset. They're agile, they work quickly, they expect quick turnaround, and they also may want to remunerate partners in a different way, more based on sales rather than on a rate card. And I think it's just coming to the table with a much more open mind if you want to work with them. And the third point is that sort of customer centricity, having a very much data-driven approach. I think if, as I sort of said at the beginning, if people work with these brands, I think they can see things that they can definitely relay to other brands or people that they work with, and to brand advertisers. I'd say, there's loads of things that they're doing really nicely and neatly, and sometimes it's because they're newer, they're not sort of heritage brands, but I think there's some innovations there that could be really useful. So just to summarize, the first thing is that the retail landscape has changed because of these D2C brands. They've sort of started to make a real impact, and it will continue to do so. We've certainly seen since the pandemic that, we had Tom Wallace from Gusto on our podcast last week, and he talked about sort of the influx of orders that they've had and how it's been really busy because obviously they provide groceries. People are looking to get those delivered, and actually it's been really strong in that sort of sector. The business has really increased, and we've seen that with a few others. We've got some more podcasts with some of our founders talking in the next couple of weeks. The second thing is that they're attracting investment, consumers and talent. People are wanting to work for these companies. Some of the companies are floating. Consumers are turning to them. And I think when we do that poll again in the future, we would see an increase in that percentage of people who have bought from them. The D2C brands absolutely thrive because they've got very clear vision. The data is pivotal to them, and digital is sort of the heart of their approach to marketing and sales. And finally, I'd just say that I think the industry's got quite a lot to learn from these innovators. They do things in interesting ways. They work in a more agile way, and they're great people. They're very smart, and a lot of them have come from this industry before they moved into the D2C space. And hopefully for you all, as not only people who work in advertising, so caring about brands, but also as consumers, there's some quite interesting stories there. The final part I'd just say is that if you want some more information, you can ask any questions. There may be some at the end, but also if you go to /Born Online, you can see the full report. There's some video case studies of each brand. There's some written case studies, and there's a lot more kind of consumer insight. So please do take a visit. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophia, for taking us through that. And managing to juggle your house, your children, and presenting live on a webinar all at the same time, which is more impressive than I could handle, so well done. If there's any questions, we'd love to hear them. I have a quick question for you, which is, we're seeing, as I kind of said at the start, D2C brands spending billions of pounds globally on advertising, tending to be with Google and Facebook. What are the lessons that we can learn with why they tend to turn to Google and Facebook, do you think?
I think it's the fact that it's quite easy for them to set up there to start with. Firstly, they're, you know, that a lot of people have come from the industry, and I think there's a lot of tools that enable them to get up and running quite quickly and see the sort of minutiae of the changes that they make. So there's the threshold can be low, they can try things out, but also it's because a lot of the brands kick off with, maybe if in a couple of the cases they started off with maybe a blog or a kind of content perspective, and they used social media to talk about their particular human truth, the challenge that they had with, there wasn't a product that did this, or there wasn't something that did that. And because they sort of built up a community through maybe an Instagram post or a Facebook, you know, whatever it might have been, they then sort of naturally moved into that space. But what we have seen with those that we've worked with, we've invited them to events, we've talked to them more. When we launched this piece of work, we share some of the stuff that we've done. They've started to work with more partners, they've started to have conversations with partners, they've started to think about different ways that they could use different channels. So it's all an education, and it's a case of it being as easy for them to enter. That threshold thing can be sometimes something that puts them off, but I think conversations can make a change.
Thank you. We'll just give it a second, see if there are any other questions that anyone has. Whilst we're doing that as well, just a reminder, we're doing these weekly webinars every week, hence the name. You can see what we've done there. But next week on Wednesday, we will launch our ad spend numbers. So they're the 2019 ad spend numbers, and we'll go through all of the data and analysis from that. So if you're interested in looking back at what happened in 2019, which I realise feels like a long time ago now, but still important numbers for the industry, so please do join us for that if that's of interest. I don't think we have any more questions. A couple of people had asked if we're sharing the deck, and we'll be sharing the deck with members afterwards, and this video will also be on our site as well. So please do look for that. There's also a feedback link that's gone round on the chat as well. We would love, one thing we've struggled with this, we've learned, is it's very hard to get feedback, and we'd love to have some because we've only done a few of these, and we'd love to know how to make them better. So please do have a little look on the chat window there and just click on the link. It should only take you sort of 30 seconds or a minute. We'd really appreciate you sharing some feedback with us. Thank you very much again for taking the time out of your day. Thank you, Sophia, for taking us through everything and all the work on it. If you have any questions afterwards, please do feel free to reach out to myself or Sophia. I'm just jon@iabuk.com if you want to send me an email. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you very much.